Hi, my name is Annabelle. I work for the admissions team at Nova Pioneer. So today we're going to be talking about our curriculum design. A lot of you have been asking questions about how are we doing 844 differently, and I'm joined by Kelsey, who will be walking us through how our curriculum is designed. So Kelsey, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kelsey Keach. I lead our learning design team here at Nova Pioneer across primary and secondary. And we're the team that puts together all of the lesson plans and activities that go out to your students.
So Kelsey, a key question that we get a lot from parents is what do we mean when we say that you're doing 844 differently? What exactly is differently from most of the schools that are doing out there?
So what we're doing is we're offering 844, but in an inquiry-based way. So what that means is rather than a teacher lecturing students on the content, students are exploring and discovering that information for themselves and then applying it, and the teacher is guiding them through that process. So, for example, in a reading lesson for a primary school student, they may be learning a grammatical rule or learning a series of sounds together. But rather than a teacher lecturing them on this, they are exposed to the information and they're asked to point that out in everyday life. So can they find the way that this grammatical rule is learned in their own reading, in their independent reading, and then can they apply that skill in their own writing during writer's workshop time? So it's really focused on the hands-on practical application of the skill rather than just learning the content itself.
Okay, that's very interesting to know because most parents are usually wondering is for my child entering kindergarten, class 1, class 2, what will they be gaining from our 844 practical approach, how we are teaching them. So could you please explain to parents in terms of how would the classroom setup look for a primary school child?
Great. So I can walk through what the average day looks like for an early primary student. So early primary is kindergarten through grade 3. And each day a child enters the room, they have a morning meeting with the class. And so the morning meeting is a relationship building time between the classmates, and it's also a time to practice one of those mental strategies. So maybe we're learning in math counting by twos, so let's count the class by twos. Let's count the number of boys and girls, something along those lines where they're doing some mental calculation. From there, we move into our literacy segment of the day, which is a long 90-minute chunk because we think literacy is especially important at the early years. And so there, students have a whole group lesson where they're learning, maybe it's a reading comprehension skill about finding the main idea from a text or making predictions. Or maybe it's a phonological and phonemic awareness skill. So that could be something along the lines of, which phonemes go together, how do they identify different sounds, or for grade 2 students, they're beginning to build their grammatical skills and proficiency in that. From that whole group lesson, students then go into a rotation. So students will, in small groups, move from different literacy centers around the room. So perhaps one is an activity where they are sorting words and learning sight words. And another could be an activity focused on sounds and how sounds go together. And then we also have a blended learning station where they're doing a computer software program, practicing the skills that they learned that day in the whole group lesson. And then we also value independent reading. So there's a place in the room where they're reading independently at books of their choice. Now, during this time, the teachers in the room are pulling out the students and working with them in small groups on guided reading. So that's reading at their level, and phonological and phonemic awareness on the skills that their small group needs to learn. And from their literacy lesson, they'll have a short break, and then we move into math, which is another big block in the day. So that's another 90-minute rotation where students have a whole group lesson as a whole class on a particular mathematical skill, and then they move into another rotation. So they are doing guided math in a small group with a teacher. They also have an area for a math center, and so that's an activity or a game to practice the skill. And then they have independent work, and that's where they're independently practicing that skill they were taught in the whole group. And then the teacher can also use that independent practice as a signal for how they did in the work and what they might need to revise or revisit. From there, we have several other components in the day, which will vary on where it falls in the day, but we have Kiswahili each day, we have PE, and then we also have creative arts, science, humanities, and Christian religious education throughout the week, as well as our lunch break, and then our special Friday schedule, which is an exploration day, where students are exploring an area of interest to them, and then we beef that up with science skills and tech skills during that time. So that's a really fun exploratory day where the students really get to practice what they've learned throughout the week.
Okay, Kelsey, I really like the point you've mentioned about class 2, where we're developing early literacy and grammar and vocabulary. I know parents are a bit hesitant in thinking of, okay, I already have my child in class 1, I don't want to move them into class 2 in a different school. So could you just provide a guideline of what they'll be gaining coming to a class 2 class at Nova Pioneer?
Great. So in addition to the inquiry-based learning that we talked about earlier, I think really a big value add is the additional time that are spent in literacy and numeracy. And the reason for that is research shows that if a student isn't reading on grade level by class 3, that after that point, they likely will not catch up. So because before that point, before class 3, a student is learning to read. After that point, they're reading to learn. And we see this play out in many of the other subjects later on, that if a student is not a strong reader, then they struggle reading their textbook in science, they struggle in humanities, they struggle in applying what they've learned in their writing. And we see this also in the jump from primary to secondary, where students really struggle with the additional application they're asked to do in secondary school. Now they're no longer doing a multiple choice exam, they're being asked to write their responses. So if they didn't develop strong writing skills early, they really have a hard time with that transition. So what we're offering in class 2 is really intentional math and literacy blocks to ensure that our students are very, very strong readers, and that they also have that number sense that's offered in our literacy or in our numeracy blocks, so that they can answer problems when they're presented in a different way than what the textbook alone might provide. And that will really build their proficiency in the other subjects with that strong foundation in that year.
Okay. And in terms of success, looking at our learning approach and how you design our curriculum, what have you seen in terms of development or changes in our students, in terms of how we're doing the delivery of our approach? What do you feel that our students are gaining from our learning approach that we term as different yet unique?
Great. So in my observations in our primary schools in South Africa, as well as our secondary schools here in Kenya, I've seen really huge gains in student confidence. We have students in primary and secondary giving presentations to large groups of people, going out into the world and educating the greater community about things. And I think it's that ability to take a positive risk, to not be too afraid to go out there and enter a competition where maybe you're the only high schooler competing, and to go out there as a Form 1 and compete alongside Form 4s in a music festival, in all of these other activities that they're going out there and doing, because we've built that confidence within them to take a risk and to problem solve and just to really go out there and get it.
Oh. Thank you for joining us for this Facebook Live chat.
And thank you. It's been wonderful talking to you today. If you'd like your child to have this experience and join the Nova Pioneer family, please remember to submit your application online.